Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of CFA Society Hong Kong, I'm pleased to welcome you all for joining our essay preparation workshop for Level 3 candidates. Before we start, please make sure you join the meeting in a quiet and indoor location. Mute your microphone while you're not speaking, and please use earphones or headphones for better sound quality. I know you are all very excited about this event based on the number of registrations, and I'm sure all of you have many questions to ask. Please leave your question in the Q&A box, and our speaker will answer them during or after the presentation. We're going to have a very informative session tonight. Firstly, I'll give you some information about Level 3 and examination process. It's similar to the kickoff session, yet for those who haven't participated last week, please bear with me, and I promise to go through the key points ASAP. I'll then give out some personal tips for Level 3 revision, and then I'll invite our guest speaker, Mr. Jad Doumith from Wiley, whom will provide his insight on essay strategies. I think it's time to introduce myself properly as well. My name is Eric, and I completed my charter almost 2 years ago. I'm currently leading a Level 3 study group, yet I'm the lucky few in Hong Kong who have taken the final Level 3 paper exam instead. So I might not be the best person to talk about CBT, but I hope I can still provide you some valuable insight in terms of revision so that all of you can revise efficiently and effectively. To begin, our Candidate Service Committee has recorded a brand new introductory video for all of you. It will provide a glimpse of our society and service provided. In addition, there will be some tips and direct links for you to access easily during your journey. Please scan the QR code on the left-hand side of the screen and save it for later use. Our administration staff has specifically reminded me again and again to tell you for those who still haven't done it, the deadline for scheduling the exam is 16th of November. It's so important that it deserves its own slide. Please, 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 if you still haven't done it by now, please do it so right after the presentation. And now, let me talk about the test center information. For the check-in process, you will be greeted by a proctor, and he or she will direct you to store your personal belongings. Make sure you bring your passport, because it's used to identify yourself instead of the Hong Kong ID. The centers or locations will be based on, well, where did you apply in the first place. And please make sure you wear your mask all the time. And then, while checking in, a piece of plastic sheet or marker will be provided for you to write, like jotting notes or writing equations, etc. You are allowed to ask for more during the exam. Yet, if you have big and poor handwriting, like myself, make sure that you accommodated the situation. You can only bring your BA2 Plus or Pro to the exam. And finally, you'll be seated at your assigned computer. Well, inside the testing room, please arrive a bit early because the registration takes a bit of time. Also, you need time to acknowledge the pledge and do a tutorial walkthrough on the system to get yourself familiar with it. I think there is a dummy program on CFA website too. Please get a feel of it before the exam. So after you have completed the first exam, you can take an optional break. Yet, if you deem to take the break, you have to go through the whole registration process again. Now, for the main event. Now, let's go through the Level 3 in a nutshell. And congratulations to all of you. You have reached the grand final of this journey. I must say CFA has saved the best to the last. This year, the main focus will be on the PM, the portfolio management, and wealth planning part, while some of the investment tools bit has drastically increased the difficulty, namely fixed income and derivatives. I know most of you here might not have portfolio management and or wealth planning experience, yet I hope you will enjoy the material like myself. The material is very applicable to daily life, and I'm sure this knowledge will provide you good knowledge as an investor. Well, for the fixed income and derivatives part, my first tip for you is to tackle it as soon as possible. While time is on your side, you better study early for these two topics and make sure you do it thoroughly. The volume of level 3 is less than level 2, but this time they're really going to test you the understanding and apply your knowledge to a specific situation. The main problem you will face in at level 3 is you can't test your luck anymore. This time, you really have to type out your answers. What to write, how to write, what not to write is the key to this exam. So practice as early as possible. And I'm sure that Jad later will give you so much valuable information and insights. For those retakers, on the curriculum and examination topics, there aren't a lot of changes this year in terms of material, actually. They even streamlined the material a bit. Yet, the major change is the exam itself. Well, I'm sure Jad later will explain more, but in a nutshell, there will be 11 questions in both of the papers, and they will now mix both structured response questions and multiple choices together. So, when it comes to study tips from my side, start early and do it now if you haven't done so. Remember, every time when you come out from your CFA exam, you promise yourself that you will study earlier next time. Honor your promise now and do it now, please. And then create a study habit, actually. I'm sure you all are capable candidates. Well, I'm not here to teach you, well, how to prepare the exam. Like, I'm sure you all are academically capable. Yet, once again, level 3 is a different ballgame. My personal advice will be to start your revision like 2 hours per day. Either wake up early in the morning for the learning bit so that you have a sharp mind, or stay up late for calculations. But to be honest with you, I ended up doing both sessions towards the end of the exam anyway. So, well, there's another tip last week from Peter, actually. Peter Linter, a colleague of Jad. And he kept saying that, yeah, you must prepare yourself for the mental stress of the exam, actually. Well, if you don't do the break in between section, most likely you have to endure a 5 hours exam. So it's better for you while you're studying, you have to prepare yourself mentally for that 5 hour long exam as well. So at the end of the day, you have to build up your mental strength to endure 5 hours of, well, CFA experience. Well, review. Let me talk about review. Yeah. Review is the holy, Tina, one slide up back, please. Review is the holy grail of tackling this exam. The final 6 to 8 weeks are used to collaborate what you have learned all together, making links between subjects and, well, etc. And 6 weeks is bare minimum for level 3 because you have to take mock exams. As I mentioned last week, it took me a month just to figure out how to answer those long questions my way. And this can only be done by doing plenty of mock exam. Well, on personal note, I took 8 myself just to feel safe. There's this famous saying on Reddit, online forum, is that it's mock till you drop. I think it's especially applicable to level 3 candidates. And as you may know by now, CFA exam is a generalist exam. While there are a lot of key topics in the exam you have to master, you should be trying to bring your weaker subject up instead of specializing in a specific topic. Especially the length of the examination is getting shorter, actually. There is no room for you to skip any of the topics now. Well, ask questions, join our study group, find a person to mark your mock exam so that you and others can give valuable feedback to each other. And for CBT, the major issue is that they will only provide you a plastic sheet of paper and marker. And I mentioned previously, find a way to make sure you're comfortable with this setting. Now you are being tested as a level 3 candidate. Use your level 3 knowledge. I had a chance to look at some of the candidates' mock exam paper, well, the one is August. And some of the answers given are too generic. At the same time, use the information provided by the exam only and don't make personal assumptions. And finally, try to answer all of the questions, which means if you are stuck at one particular question, fix income. Especially the ones that you have well prepared, but somehow you got stuck. Your ego will step in and you will spend more time than allowed to finish it. Remember, every question is worth the same mark anyway. So by answering one and leaving some easy questions unanswered at the back of the exam, it's just double penalizing yourself. For my personal essay question tips, learn your command words. The different definition of every command words is on CFA website, actually. They specifically got a PDF for this for a reason. Let me give you an example. There's describe, explain, and discuss. And already, these words contain 3 different levels of understanding of understanding required from CFA, actually. Well, if describe means that you call the base level of understanding, they expect more from you if you use explain. Most importantly, they expect you to know the calculation bit too if they ask explain in the questions. And finally, discuss is a high-level command word. Not only it incorporate describe and explain, CFA is actually looking for pros and cons of both sides of that specific topic as well. Well, I'm sure that there are lists of tips for you on the screen, and I'm sure that Jad later will mention all of these information as well. So if there is only one advice I can give you to take home, is this: learn the command words. Not only you will know what to expect to write in the exam, it also reflects how well you should study a specific LOS too, because these command words are used at the very beginning of each chapter, actually. There are several high-level command words on the list as well. For example, justify, contrast, but due to a lack of time, well, you have to figure out yourself. And well, now, this year, CFA Society Hong Kong partnered with Wiley, and you are entitled to enjoy the complimentary access to Wiley's resources. They have provided some very useful material like mock exams and ethics courses, which are some key elements to pass this exam. Be sure to check it out. Also, there's a limited offer for their exam review packages. Please scan the QR code. Yeah. If you are interested to know more. And well, it's time to bring in our guest speaker for tonight. He is a charter holder himself and also the lead instructor of Wiley, and he teaches every level 3 topics himself. So without further ado, let me present to you Mr. Jad Doumith, CFA.
Thank you, Eric, and hello, everyone. First, I'm gonna upload my slides. All right, so I hope everyone is doing good. So thanks again for Eric, and thank you for the CFA Society of Hong Kong for inviting me. It's a real pleasure to be with you today. So my name is Jad. I'm also a CFA charter holder. I passed the level 3 exam actually more than a decade ago, and since then, precisely since 2011, I've been teaching basically all levels of the CFA program. That's something I love to do, actually. So again, very happy to be here. Other than my involvement in teaching the CFA, I've also taught a lot of the FRM exam. I've worked as a regulator for 10 years with the central bank, namely in supervising market risk, liquidity risk, interest rate risk, and more generally investments, banks' investments. I've also founded a company called Risk Plus Solutions. It's a consulting and advisory company where we also build in-house risk management and BI solutions. And as Eric mentioned, I also teach all levels of the CFA, actually all topics of the level 3 exam with Wiley, and some topics here and there of the first 2 levels. I've been teaching the CFA program at my own institute that I founded also in 2011. So that's something, again, that I love to do whenever we can. I think it works also it's the same for any other instructor. Whenever we can add value, whenever we can enhance the learning experience, that's something that we love to do. So today we'll be talking about the level 3 essay portion of the exam, right? So how to read the question, how to provide a good, even better, a great answer, how a solid technical knowledge is really something very, very important, because I know that many are actually waiting to hear, like, plain tips on how to write, how to structure the answer, etc. You will see that this is inevitably very, very much and very closely linked to having a good or a very solid background and a very good understanding of the question that you are trying to answer. So you cannot have one without the other. You cannot just be great at writing essays and know all the tips if you don't really have an excellent command of the concept that you are trying to answer. And I'll try to show you how those things are very closely interlinked. So the agenda on my part is we'll talk very quickly about the level 3 exam format changes. I think that that's something very positive for all level 3 candidates worldwide. And what Eric also already mentioned, I'll touch 2 words on that. We'll look closely, as I said, at exam essay strategies. We will look at real previous CFA level 3 exams, so that we try to apply the strategies and we try to apply the tips that we will be discussing today together. We'll talk a bit about the grading process, and then I'll be very, very happy to, if you have any questions, I can help you on. I'd be very happy to answer. So let's start with really the most important change. So as Eric mentioned earlier, previously, prior to the namely February 2023 exam, the morning session of the CFA exam was all about the essay part, right? So all questions on the morning session, what we call the AM session, right, was all about constructed response questions, all about essay questions. And then you had the afternoon session, which was entirely devoted to multiple choice questions, exactly like what you know from level 2. So the exact format of the level 2 exam, this was the afternoon session of the CFA level 3 exam. Now, one thing that was extremely common, and I think those who already, I'm seeing that there are some questions, maybe it will, I'm going to leave them right till the end, especially when they are general questions. But please, if you have any question on whatever we are discussing at a particular point in time, please drop it in the Q&A section and I'll answer immediately. But for more general questions, I think we will leave them till the end of the session. So as I was saying, something that was very common to occur, and if there are here some retakers or like Eric and myself, we did the exam, a paper-based exam, right? Because I did the level 3 in 2011, I think, so, or 10. So the point was that a lot of candidates really struggled to finish the morning session. It's extremely common if you do a quick survey. I've been teaching, sometimes hundreds of CFA Level 3 candidates on an annual basis, and that's a very, very recurring comment. So everyone, or almost everyone, struggles very seriously, or struggled very seriously to finish the morning section of the exam, and they finished quite early the afternoon session. So this was a bit frustrating because many candidates knew that if they were allowed some additional time, they would have finished the level 3 morning session and hence would not have lost valuable points. So to make it simple here, CFA Institute actually mixed the two types of questions in both sessions. And that's really, in my opinion, the most important change to the level 3 format. So starting from the February 2023 exam, the morning session will be a mix. It will still contain 11 item sets, or 11 sets actually, but 6 of them, or 5, so you might have 5 essay questions and 6 MCQs, and in the afternoon it will be the opposite, so 6 essays and 5 MCQs. But the fact that they are mixing those, so the AM session and the PM session will have both type of questions, will allow candidates probably to finish on time, or at least to finish with, or at least to complete a larger portion of the exam. I think that this is an important change. It's a positive one, right? A lot of, or some people might complain regarding the computer-based testing because they are used to, paper-based and pencil-based, which is quite understandable for many people. But this, let's look on the bright side, right? This is a positive change. This will allow you not to have a full session dedicated to essays, which typically requires a larger effort when it comes to going faster and trying to finish on time. So want to start on a bright note, right? So the level 3 exam will be about, as I said, the morning session and the PM session. And Eric mentioned, discussed those details. I think it's already very well covered. So you have 2 hours and 12 minutes. You have an optional break. If you take that break, you'll have to go through the registration again. But then again, it's always about the trade-off, right? Like when you're reading the question, the faster you go, the more time you gain, but the more prone to errors you might be, because reading faster might mean that you might omit some important information. So there is always a trade-off, like try to go as fast as possible, but while at the same time not missing anything of value. So here it's the same. You might need to rest. And what Eric mentioned also, I'd like to, because also Peter Olinto mentioned it, it's very important that you, whenever you study at home, you get used to the fact that this is a 5 hours exercise. That's a really large effort. That's something that can be exhausting. So at some point you should be studying, and that's a study tip. You should be studying at home. I'm not saying every day, of course. If you can do it every day, then that would be amazing. But you should have some sessions where you study for like 3-4 hours, so that you are used to that, to keeping your concentration very high for that amount of time. Good. So we always talk about essay writing tips. What I think is often neglected is how to actually read the question, right? Because I don't only want to focus on how to provide a good answer, because again, a good answer is fundamentally linked to a good reading of the question. So this might sound intuitive, but again, I can give you many examples where a candidate would unfortunately lose very valuable points because of not paying attention to every single word. So my first advice, and before talking about how to provide a good answer, you should learn also how to read the question, right? So you have to focus very carefully on every word. That's extremely important. I can give you really numerous examples all real life examples, real past CFA exams. Of course, when I say that, I mean those exams that were previously published, because you guys know that we can't discuss questions that occurred on the CFA exams unless they were actually published, right, to the public. And this was the case prior to the 2019 CFA Level 3 exam. The Institute used to, and I'm sure you guys have maybe access to some of those, they used to publish all the morning papers for the CFA Level 3 exam. So you used to have those real papers so that you can see how the actual exam looks like. And this was also quite valuable. So read every word very carefully. Why am I saying that? Because maybe in a private wealth management context, you might see a case on an investor or a family, right, with somewhere in the text where they mention that this family or this investment or this investor is actually managing in saving, for example, $50,000 annually. Now, this is an extremely powerful word, right? Saving $50,000 annually. This is an important word. And if you miss it, you won't really realize immediately that this investor's portfolio is no longer required to cover any of the investor's living expenses, because you can only save if your salary is already covering all your expenses. So what they would typically do here is that they would give you a lot of information about annual expenses. And you guys know, for those who studied for the Level 3 exam or already took it and are retaking it, or even for those who sat for Level 2, you can clearly recognize the idea. You have an investor with an investable asset base, right? Like $2-3 million, and you have annual expenses. And then you need to know what rate of return is needed for your portfolio to be able to cover those expenses. Well, it's very important to read the question, because if you have any mention, right, on the fact that this investor is managing to save money, then all the information regarding living expenses is really a distractor. So you won't really need it, and you could go really wrong if you don't realize that the fact that they're saving means that they don't need the portfolio to cover for their living expenses. That's a very practical and real life case of how, if you miss a word or if you miss a hint, then you might answer incorrectly. Now, the double whammy, the double problem here, guys, is that if you miss, for example, the fact that this investor is able to save money, then you would factor in your answer all the expenses, you will adjust them for inflation, you will do some calculations, and all of that is absolutely useless. So not only your answer would be incorrect, but you would also lose extremely precious time. So this is where it can hurt you twice. Not reading the question very carefully could actually hurt you twice, because not only you are losing points, because again, of course, if you incorporate an information that is wrong whenever you answer a question, then obviously the answer will be incorrect. But not only have you done that, you have also wasted time. And time is extremely precious in the essay section. As I was telling you like 5 minutes earlier, a lot of candidates struggled. And if you do a quick survey around you guys, you will see that many CFA Level 3 candidates never finished the morning session of the CFA exam. I can say it for myself. When I did the exam more than 12 years ago, I did not 100% completely finish the morning session of the exam, and I probably finished the afternoon session with like more than an hour to spare, and the exam back then was 4 hours. So the total 3 hours, excuse me, every session, so the total was 6 hours, right? Today it's 4 hours and 25 minutes. So even the mental and physical effort that Eric was rightfully referring to was also something to consider, right? So also on reading the question, a lot of candidates find it very valuable to first read the question. So you know, you have the given, you have a long text, and then you have questions. So for many candidates, it makes sense to first read the question, because when you read the question, guys, you have put a good context in your mind, so that when you read the given, you know what you're looking for, right? So if the question, for example, says, discuss 3 advantages of following the approach that Mr. X is recommending. So when you read the text, you know that what you're looking for is the approach. Why is the approach good in the particular context of the given that they are showing you on the exam? So please always resist the temptation to answer from memory. You know, I've studied that. I know that typically advantages of a particular approach are 1, 2, 3. Resist really the temptation to start writing quickly. Understand the context of the given that you have. Why in that particular case is this approach better than another approach? So reading the question, again, many candidates, I'm not saying everyone should do it, I'm saying you should try it, because I do admit that it provides some context. So when I read, did this fund violate its mandate, right? It had a mandate of managing the funds in a given way. Did it violate the mandate? So when I quickly, at a glance, you know, read the question, right? I know when I read the given, what am I looking for? So what are the structured informations and what are information I'm highlighting mentally, because those are the ones that I would actually need to answer my question. But please, if you follow this strategy, then of course, guys, when you read the question first and then you read the text, of course, you have to reread the question again to make sure that you did not miss anything, to make sure that you read every word carefully, right? And not only in the given, but also in the question. You need to read every word carefully, both in the given and in the question, because you might miss what the question is actually asking you, right? You might miss what the question is actually asking of you. I don't know if I had a technical problem. All right, I'm sorry, can you guys still hear me? Yeah, any issues?
Okay.
All right, perfect. You can still hear me. Okay, great. So, all right. So reading the question, extremely important. All right. Now, one thing I have also found extremely useful when reading the question to provide an even better context is really to ask myself, and this is something that is important when you practice. You can't do it on the exam. You can't start to do that on the exam. But while you read the question, believe me, it might sound intuitive, but that's an advice I give every year to all the candidates that I have the privilege to deal with. You need to mentally identify the concept that is actually being tackled. I mean, if you think about it very simply, questions will not relate to concepts that you don't know, right? So any question that you see, even if you don't know the answer yet, try to remember that you know it. Sometimes you just don't know yet what concept is being asked in this particular question. And it helps tremendously to practice really understanding what concept is being tested here. So while I read the question, while I'm on the exam and I read the question, what I'm trying to do here is that I'm trying to locate, to isolate in my mind, okay, wait, this is the concept the writer of the question is trying to test. At the end of the day, again, those who are writing those questions are just testing whether you understand or not a given list of concepts, right? They have like, let's say 500 concepts. One concept being that you guys know what a beta is. Another concept is you guys know what a duration is. A third concept is you know how a higher coupon or a higher yield would impact the duration of a bond, whether it lowers it or it increases it, all else equal. So those are examples of concepts. And the question will be written to address 1, 2, or 3 concepts at most, let's say. So while reading, when I have that concept in mind, when I say, okay, yes, I know what the grader, I know what the writer of the question is trying to test. Once you know that simple, very intuitive idea, then you can channel really your thinking. You don't have all those distracted information in your mind. You know exactly what you're looking for. You can, in a way, you can narrow your mind. You can put all your focus, all your energy, all your intelligence on that question, one question at a time. So this would remove a bit the, the ambiguity and the fog that sometimes we have maybe when we're stressed or not. And to do that, and that's something I would stress on again, and I will be giving live examples in a second, you really need, guys, to have a good command of every concept. Now, one thing that I would advise you, because I know we're here today to say, okay, essay writing tips, but guys, I can't take someone who like studied 10 hours for the CFA Level 3 exam and say, sit down, I'm going to give you great tips and you're going to pass. It's not going to happen. It cannot happen. Good essay writing tips on their own are not sufficient. And the ideas are extremely interlinked. I am a better writer because at the end of the day, it's not poetry you're writing. They are called essay questions, but you don't really have to write in an essay form, right? No one is going to grade you on your literature skills. No one is going to grade you on your use of fancier words. On the opposite, they will grade you on the fact that you will be able to convey the idea, the right information, as Eric mentioned, what to write and what not to write. No one is expecting you to write some poetry. You can give bullet points, as you will see later. You can provide your answer in bullet points, use the buzzwords, straight to the point answers. But to do that, you have to have a very good command of the concept. So let me give you here an interesting example. So just let me give you a quick example. We're talking here about formulas, right? And a very good advice that I will allow myself to give you guys is make sure that you understand every single formula. Do the extra effort. Try to see, why is this formula written this way? Because typically when you understand that, what you're gaining is absolutely not only some mathematical know-how. It doesn't really matter, I can say, in an exam context. I don't need you to be math withered, right? What you would really gain is a full, crystal clear understanding of what's happening in front of your eyes. And this will allow you to be better able to read the question, answer a question, channel your thoughts to a given concept, and not really be lost and rely on memory. So in the exam, for those who already studied, those who are retaking it, and even for those who have never sat for the level 3 exam yet, you know, there are lots and lots of formulas. Math is a language, right? It's writing in numbers, whatever you can express in English, in French, in Spanish, in any language you can think of, right? In any language you can think of. So math is a language. I'm saying an idea, but I'm saying it with numbers, with symbols, instead of writing long sentences. So look at those two formulas. My big advice to you, my tip for you guys, is to actually make sure that you understand concepts and formulas in a very solid way. This will help you beyond what you expect in both reading, but also writing and giving a good essay answer. Don't think that they are disconnected. Don't only look for the tips I will be giving you in 5 minutes. Like, this is how you write, this is how you structure your answer. We're going to do that. No issues, no worries there. But the fuel behind that, the backbone behind that, is an excellent, flawless understanding of what we're doing. Let's take an example. So there's a concept at level 3 where they talk about the absolute contribution to total risk of a given asset. So if I have a 2-asset portfolio or a 50-asset portfolio, what is each asset of those 50? How much is each asset of those 50 contributing to total risk? And then they give you a formula. They say that's the weight of the asset in the portfolio, the weight, right? How much have you invested of your own funds in that asset, multiplied by the marginal contribution of that asset. Great. So what is the marginal contribution? It's the beta of the asset multiplied by the portfolio volatility. So this is what they're saying, guys. They're saying that an asset contributes to the total risk of a portfolio based on 3 fundamental factors. How much you invest in that asset, so the weight that you invest in that asset, the beta of that asset in respect of the portfolio, so how sensitive that asset is in respect to the portfolio, and then the standard deviation of the portfolio. There are 3 kinds of candidates, in my view. There are those who would memorize this concept, and think with me how easy it would be to write a question to make them provide a wrong answer, because all they did is just to memorize the formula. it's extremely easy for anyone who would be writing questions, who is a professional at writing questions, to write a question with, you know, information that would immediately break down this memorization of this formula, because it's not, the given is not really exactly structured in the way you are expecting it to be, given that you memorize the information. A second type would be to have some intuition saying that, okay, fair, so definitely the contribution of an asset to the total risk would be related to its weight. Also, definitely it's related to how sensitive it is. But then again, the risk of the portfolio. Some intuition would be to say, okay, so the riskier the portfolio and the more sensitive the asset is, the riskier the asset, right? Because beta is the sensitivity of the asset in respect to the portfolio. So the riskier the portfolio is, the higher the beta of the asset, the riskier the asset is. And then naturally, you have the weight that you have invested in that asset that would naturally dictate the contribution of that asset to the total risk. That's not bad. But what's even better than this, guys, and it's absolutely the opposite of wasting time when you study. It's exactly what it is what you will still remember when you finish your CFA exam, right? It is what we'll get back to the ethics for non-native English speakers, don't worry, because I'm a non-native English speaker too, right? So the idea here is that by knowing what you're doing mathematically, it is always almost always the case that you're not just learning how to derive. You're saying, oh, wait, now I understand what we're talking about. Now I understand how things are linked. So let me look at this formula here, which unfortunately many candidates would memorize. And let me tell you that there are like hundreds of formulas, not one of them that you cannot demonstrate. Not one single one of them that you cannot stop for a second, right? Look at, understand, and then remember for life. Because when you memorize, you forget. And the idea is not only about passing the CFA exam. The idea is about building fundamental knowledge to really have an edge professionally, right? It's not just passing the exam and forgetting everything you've done. Then what you'll be left with is a piece of paper. And that's not what we're looking for, right? So where is this formula coming from? What is it trying to say? I'm going to show something that you guys are extremely familiar with. The variance of a given portfolio, right, is related to the weight invested in each asset squared multiplied by the variance squared, right? So let's say this is a 2-asset portfolio. That's what you guys know. And that's already good. Covariance between 1 and 2. Now, maybe what you never stopped at to think very simply is, what is the contribution of asset 1 to the total risk of the portfolio? Well, look, let's look at the formula. What asset 1 brings with it to the total variance of the portfolio is this, which is naturally related to the weight you invest in it and the variance of that asset. Obviously, the riskier it is, the higher its contribution to the portfolio. But it also brings with it, as a contribution to the total risk of the portfolio, its covariance with any other existing asset. I have highlighted in yellow the contribution. That's how simple it is. This potentially ugly formula, right, is just showing you the contribution of asset 1 to the total risk of the portfolio. Highlighted in yellow, you have that. Now, what is the contribution of asset 2? Now highlighted in green. Asset 2 is naturally bringing its own standard deviation and the weight that you invest in it, but it's also bringing its covariance with any other existing asset. And by the way, this W1, W2 covariance 1, 2 exists twice. So if you ever wondered, this is why, of course, I can demonstrate it also mathematically, but if you ever wondered analytically why you have this 2, this is the reason. Because asset 1 brings its own risk and its covariance with the other asset, and asset 2 does the same. Asset 2 also contributes its own risk and weight to the portfolio, and also its covariance with the other asset. So you have twice this W1, W2 covariance 1, 2. So to go a bit faster, I think we need to finish by 8:15, and just 2 minutes on that to show you and to try to set a standard. So every time you study, you need to make sure that this is the standard you're following. You're understanding everything you're doing. right? So what's the contribution of asset one to the total risk? It's the part highlighted in yellow. So let's rewrite it, right? So let's rewrite it here. That's the part highlighted in yellow. Great. Now, that's the contribution to variance. What if I wanted to isolate the contribution to standard deviation? Because at the end of the day, risk is defined as standard deviation. Super easy. If you take the radical of variance, that's variance, right? If you take the radical of variance, you have standard deviation. But also, if you divide variance by standard deviation, you have standard deviation. It's as if you took the radical. So to find the contribution of asset one to standard deviation, all I have to do is to divide this by standard deviation. This would be the contribution of asset one. How much does asset one contribute to the total standard deviation? From here, guys, it's very fast, very simple mathematical manipulation, right? What I will do here is that I will put the W1 outside, and then you'd have inside W1 variance 1 plus W2 covariance 1, 2, and then this is divided by sigma. This is the contribution of asset one to the standard deviation of the portfolio, right? This is the contribution. Now let's continue. We need to show how did they arrive to this form. But the good news now is, regardless of the mathematical manipulation you'll do next, you now know that this formula actually comes from just looking at this formula and isolating the contribution of the asset to total standard deviation. So let's continue this just for the sake of showing you how we get to the same result. I'm going to erase this to have some space. So that's where we are now in our formula. All I need you to remember now, and look at those nice mathematical tricks, is that the variance of an asset is also the covariance of the asset with itself, right? So the variance of asset one is also the covariance of asset one with itself. That's variance. At this point, a nicer result will now emerge, guys, is that if you look inside the part I'm highlighting in green, that's weight one times the covariance of one with itself plus weight two times the covariance of one with two. Since this is a two-asset portfolio, then this bracket here has the covariance of one with every single other assets, including itself, in the portfolio, right? So covariance of one with one and covariance of one with two. That's covariance of one with the total portfolio. So all of this can be replaced by covariance of one with the total portfolio. That's a nice result that we have here. So I'm going to erase this one here and replace it by covariance of one with the portfolio. The very last trick to get to the final form of the formula as per CFA Institute textbooks, right, would be to recognize that the beta of an asset is the covariance of that asset divided by the variance of whatever index or portfolio you are calculating beta against. So if beta is covariance 1p divided by variance p, then covariance 1p is beta multiplied by variance p. So I will take away covariance here and replace it with beta multiplied by variance p. The final step, of course, is to simplify here, and you get the formula the way CFA Institute wants you to see it. Again, math is a language. I can stop wherever I decide to stop, and for some reason, whoever wrote the formula for absolute contribution to total risk decided to stop at that point in time. I could have stopped the formula one step earlier, and it would have been weight invested in asset one multiplied by the covariance of that asset with the portfolio divided by the variance of the portfolio. That would still be correct. What I would like to say here is that on top of knowing this some quick mathematical derivation, you guys now very, very solidly can link this formula to this one, which is simply showing the physical contribution, sure, the contribution to total risk. All right. So that this is in regard to having a very good command of the concepts you guys have. So whenever you have an answer on the CFA exam, it can be in one of three formats. It can be an essay box where you can input a number and the text. It can be a numerical entry only. So please understand that you can only input a number, or it can be a multiple choice question. They still appear, but they are a bit rare for the morning session. A very important point to note here, at the core of how to give a proper answer, right? So whenever you have an essay box, however, the question calls for an answer. So an answer that is numerical. So basically you are calculating a percentage or you are calculating a return. You have the absolute right of not showing your explanation. Again, you have the right not to show your explanation. You have the right not to write anything and only to provide that numerical answer. If it's correct, you will get the full grade. Now, of course, guys, and there's a trade-off here, you could choose to show your explanation, and this would be my advice. This would be my tip here. But again, there's a trade-off, because the more you show of your explanation, the more you show of your thought process, the more time you will be using. However, the advantage is if your final answer is incorrect, the grader will still be able to look at your thought process, will still be able to see your formulas and the explanation that you provided, and will give you partial credit. All right, that's an important thing to remember. You must know that if you want to calculate a number, you can choose to show the formulas you used and the explanation, and you can choose not to do so. And remember that there is always this trade-off. So if you think you are comfortable on time, do show the formula you used, do show your thought process, because if your final answer is incorrect, you will still get partial credit. Good. Now, how to provide a good answer? And this is a bit different from just reading the question. That's the second part of the idea and the final part. So how to provide a good answer? Let's look at that. So know what concept is actually tested. I've already discussed that. It's very important. When you read the question, you know what concept is being asked of you. Immunization of a liability. Good. So I know now that when I read, I need to look at what I already know are conditions for an immunization of a liability. I'll give an example in 5 minutes on that. All right. So it sounds intuitive. It's very important. It can really change the way you answer your question. Do not write essay answers. Don't do that. Don't write long, complicated sentences. Use bullet points. If they say, what are 3 advantages of adopting this methodology? A bullet point. This methodology is suitable for derivatives and the portfolio contains options. This as an answer would receive potentially full credit if that's part of the answers. You don't need to start writing about how derivatives have non-normal distributions, which means that, for example, a methodology built on standard deviation and normality would not be suitable. No, you have already showed the grader that you know that this methodology is appropriate, for example, for derivatives. Again, I will give practical, or if you want real life answers, just in the next slide when we look at a previous exam. So go with bullet points, never go with long essay sentences, right? The grader is not really interested in seeing fancy words. They want to see what we call buzzwords, which can show the grader that, yes, this person completely understands the topic, completely understands what they are doing. Right? So for example, and I will be looking at the question in minutes. If I'm looking, for example, at a strategy where you have a delta hedging strategy with derivatives. So whenever you have a strategy like this one, if it's delta hedge, then you know that it will earn the risk-free rate, for example. So if the question calls on this idea, by showing that you understand perfectly that a delta hedged portfolio will earn the risk-free, if it's part of the context, then that's something that they want to see. So resist the temptation of rewriting and re-explaining and using another sentence to explain something to emphasize a point. You don't need that. You don't need to insist. You don't need to emphasize. Opposite to what I'm doing now. I'm insisting on that fact because you don't have to do it. You will lose very precious time. Command words, and this was also tackled by Eric earlier. Command words are important. When I read describe, at least I know that they expect of me something written. They expect that I provide like a description. When they say calculate, then whatever you do, guys, they want a number. You can write the best logic that you can think of out there. You can show that you have a pure, complete, and solid understanding of a concept. But if I don't see a number, then you don't have the question right. So whenever you see calculate, they are expecting a number. Of course, on the more basic part, whenever they say we need 3 reasons, just don't waste time giving more than 3 reasons, because they will only read the 3 reasons. All right? Show your calculations only if time allows it, because as I said, this will allow to show that you have mastered the concept, and they might or they will give you partial credit, even if the final answer is incorrect. Answer all questions that you have. There are no penalties for answering wrong. There are no penalties for leaving a question blank. So try, give it your best shot, right? Try to answer every question. When you leave the ones that are harder to the end, then go back to them if time allows it and try to answer them. So I think that the best way to put those tips into practice, because again, you guys should not expect that with only some tips on essay writing, that's it. You have everything you need to clear the exam. You need to use those with a solid understanding of what you're doing. So let's take, before we talk about the grading process, let's take an example. So let's put together all the tips that we have talked about in this example, a real life example that is taken from the 2018 CFA exam. All right, real CFA exam. So first, you can quickly read the question. So I have the given and I have a question. Determine which portfolio in Exhibit 1 would best immunize the future liability. Justify your response. Now, before I start reading the given, I have channeled, guys, my thought process. I know what concept is tested. I know that what I'm looking for now is a portfolio that will immunize a liability. So when I'm reading, I know that I'm carefully only selecting the information that is relevant to immunization of a future liability. Please also look carefully at the command words, because those are important. Don't waste too much time. It's simple and they are in bold. Determine which portfolio. They are expecting you to say portfolio A, B, or C. Make sure your answer has that. I'm saying clearly and plainly which portfolio will be the better portfolio. Now, justify your response. So you're going to have to say why. And this is the part where we will apply whatever I said earlier regarding don't use fancy long sentences. Use really bullet points, straight to the points. And that's only possible when you guys actually know the concept very solidly, right? So let's look at that. Read the question very, very carefully. So we have a fixed income portfolio manager. One of her institutional clients needs to immunize a single 10-year liability. Every word counts. Single liability. You don't have a multiple streams of liabilities. You have a single liability that you will pay 10 years from now. That's hugely important, because if you've missed that, you don't know that this is a zero coupon liability with a duration of 10. Because as you guys know, a zero coupon bond has a duration equal to, right, its maturity, the Macaulay duration, right? Because at the end of the day, the Macaulay duration is the weighted average time it takes to earn back all the promised cash flows on a bond. And since a zero coupon bond has only one cash flow occurring in year 10, so that's the Macaulay duration. So read every word very carefully. It's hugely important to get those points, to know that it's a zero coupon liability. It has a Macaulay duration of 10 because it has a maturity of 10. And of course, it's a liability of $120 million. So we calculate the present value of this liability to be 92 million. Exam tips. Since I read the question I know that they want me to determine which portfolio best immunizes this liability. Immediately, what you should do, right, when you're sitting for the exam, is to recollect the relevant information that you need. Since you know that the question is about immunizing a single liability, the only ideas that should be in your mind at that point in time should be the following. What are the conditions for the immunization of a single liability? That's it. This is where I was saying, know what concept is tested. The writer of that question and subsequently the grader of that question is just testing you on your knowledge of this particular set of concepts. Do you know or not what are the conditions to immunize a single liability? 2, would you know how to apply them? And 3, can you give me a nice, concise essay format response that shows me that the answer to questions 1 and 2 are yes? So how would you go about that? Again, if we are applying the exam tips that we talked about, how would you apply that? So in my mind, there are 3 conditions for the immunization of a single liability. You should know them. It's very important because my answer will be structured around them. I'm structuring the answer as I go. And that's the best thing I think you can do as time management. So first, the present value of assets should be at least equal to the present value of the liability. I need to know that. 2, right? We need to have an equal Macaulay duration. So the Macaulay duration of the assets and liabilities should be equal. Of course, I will not go now and open a parenthesis here regarding why, right? So this would be maybe off topic now, but again, for me, very honestly, everything is linked. If you don't know that, you can't provide a good answer, no matter how good the tips are. So the Macaulay duration should be equal. 3, you need to minimize the convexity of the asset. You need to recollect, while you read the question, recollect those 3 simple but very important information, right? Because those will be your answers. Now, we need to determine the portfolio. So she decides not to use a 0 coupon bond. Obviously, she will be using one of the 3 portfolios, all right? And consider 3 possible immunization portfolios using non-callable fixed rate US Treasury bonds. She prepares a comparative analysis of the 3 portfolios in Exhibit 1. We read every word carefully. Zerbi explains to Oswayo that once chosen, the immunized portfolio will need to be rebalanced over time. That's correct, but I'm not going to use it in this answer. Also very important. When I read the question, I know exactly what information to keep, what to filter out. This sentence is extremely true, but I will not need it because it's not really a question here about rebalancing or not. So provide a good answer now. Determine which portfolio would best immunize. Your answer should be super direct if you don't have a template where you circle the portfolio. First, your answer should be super direct to have the best grade possible in case the rest is correct. So the best portfolio is, for example, portfolio A, right? This will give you partial credit if portfolio A is correct, even if your justification is not that strong, because that's the first part of the question. Which portfolio would best immunize? Now, to be able to answer, we know what are the conditions. So if I look at portfolio A, I see that it has a Macaulay duration equal to that of the liability virtually, which is 10. I see that it has a market value that exceeds the market value of the liability, right? But then again, of course, I need to look at B and C to check if A is better or not. I can quickly disqualify portfolio B because the present value of the assets falls short of that of the liability. So this is disqualified. Please carefully. Sometimes the question will say, for each of the portfolios that were not selected, you need to justify why they were not selected. So read the question very carefully. In that part, you should not only say why portfolio A is the best portfolio, you should also say why you dismissed B and C. So again, you can never overemphasize how important it is to read the question carefully. So portfolio C is disqualified because the Macaulay duration is quite off, is quite different from the Macaulay duration of the liability. Now, how do I provide a good answer in bullet points, right? No long sentences. The portfolio that would best immunize the future liability is portfolio A. Now, and I open, 2 points. Now, I'm going to justify why. First bullet point, that's all they need to know. The value of the portfolio A exceeds the present value of the liability. Please, and you stop. No one is asking you to re-justify this justification. No one is telling you, okay, but why is that a condition? You do not have to reinvent the wheel. That's something we would do in class. I would explain to you why that's a condition. But on the exam, you need to state the condition. You don't need to re-explain why it is important mathematically for the present value of the assets to exceed that of the liability. That's not an essay, guys. What you need to say here is, 1, the present value of portfolio A exceeds the present value of the liability. Perfect. 2, the Macaulay duration of portfolio A is virtually identical to the Macaulay duration of the liability. That's the second condition. That's it. I'm not writing any letter beyond those, right? And then 3, right? First, they don't say that they need 3 justification. So you provide whatever justification you need. At that point in time, portfolio A is a good portfolio. Now, it happens that the other 2 portfolios are impossible to use. So I can use this in point 3 by saying portfolio B and C are not appropriate because portfolio B's assets fall short of the present value of the liabilities, and portfolio C's Macaulay duration significantly departs from that of the portfolio. Stop. That's it. The reason I have included justification number 3, even though they don't say provide 3 justification, the reason I have included that, guys, is because there might have been another possibility. So A satisfies the conditions. Now, what about B and C? I need to say that those do not even satisfy the conditions. Because if one of the other 2 portfolios, B or C, did satisfy the conditions, then I would have to choose between A, B, or C. And this, and only this, guys, would be where I would use the third condition, which is to minimize convexity. And that's a trick question here, because the minimum convexity is for answer C, but C is irrelevant. C is not a good portfolio because it already fails condition number 2, which is the Macaulay duration, right? So that's a clear example where you need to read the question first, go read the given very carefully, go read the question again to make sure you are addressing every command word. Time is on my mind. That's why when I read the question, I recollected all the information I needed. I have provided mentally a context. I know that the only thing I will be needing in this exercise here are those 3 important facts. I will not pollute my mind with other things. I will now have full focus on those 3 facts and I will use them. Also, continuing on the tips and recapping, reminding you how we use them. We provided short bullet point answers that provided the key concepts we needed. We wanted to show, think about it, what I wanted to show the grader is the following. A satisfies all the conditions, B and C do not. Stop. In whatever way you write it, guys, but make sure you tell them what those conditions are. You cannot say A satisfies all immunization conditions, but how do I know if you know them or not, right? So that's how you should, that's how when you use your judgment. So this was the information I needed to convey to the grader. I need to show them that I recognize that A satisfies the conditions for immunization, B and C do not. This could have been a different question, guys, again, and before we conclude, where 2 portfolios would have satisfied the conditions. Then you would see which one satisfies them best. Because the third condition is you need to minimize the convexity. In the hypothetical scenario where another portfolio would also be good, then you would choose the one with the lowest convexity. And you would show your grader how this would be a perfect answer. Yes, sure. And this is what so are you asking me whether you can ignore the grammar, or are you asking me if I can provide an answer? Because I think this is what we did. So again, if you are writing this, it's recorded. If you're taking notes, portfolio A is the one that best immunizes the future liability. 1, its present value exceeds the present value of the liability. Stop. 2, its Macaulay duration is identical to the Macaulay duration of the liability. 3, portfolios B and C cannot be used because one has assets that fall short of the liabilities PV and the other has a significantly different Macaulay duration. Full stop. Grammar, problems with language are really not important, right? It's not really important. Handwriting, etc. It's computer-based nowadays, so you have no issue. But it's not really important whether you make grammar mistakes. They very much recognize that we are not all native English speakers, right? So we know English as a second or third language for some of us. So it's important, and they know that. You don't have to worry about that. What you have to worry about, what you need to realize is that the best tip we can give here, you need to provide short answers that address the facts that should be known. Imagine we're having a conversation and I tell you, just give me the 3 ideas. Tell me why I need to choose that. Don't provide an explanation to the why. Then this is how I want you to approach it. I want you to approach it as, okay, what do I wish to tell the grader? I wish to tell them that I know what the conditions for immunization are, and I know that A satisfy them, and I know that B and C do not. Don't write fancy sentences. This example, I chose it to show you, before we conclude here, to show you an overview of really how we apply those tips. I have read the question first, very carefully. I have read the given while recollecting the information I need. You have to do that if you want to finish on time, even though the changes will make it easier to finish on time. I have focused carefully on every single word because I need any information that they can give me. When I recollected my information, I made sure that I provided the grader with exactly what they need to know, with no literature, no really long sentences. And I knew that I have cornered and captured everything that needed to be captured. It would be a pleasure, of course, for the sake of time, I have just to touch 2 words on the grading process. And then again, of course, if you have questions later on, you can send them by email. We can schedule a session where you guys come with your questions, formulas, more on practical cases on how to write essay questions, because of course we only have 40 minutes. So trying to squeeze all that in 40 minutes. So the grading process, guys, what you need to know is that the essay sections are, of course, graded manually, cannot be graded via a machine. What they do is that they get a group of CFA charter holders to the US, to Charlottesville, where they meet, and each group of CFA charter holder will only grade 1 question based on their expertise, based on their specialty. And don't worry about misgrading, because there is a system of graders who grade other graders. There's a system of questions that are graded more than once, especially for those that don't have clear-cut grades. So for example, if it's a flawless grade question or a 0 grade, typically not very debatable. But for a lot of the questions that are in between, to make sure that the grader did a good assessment, it will be regraded again. And if there are conflicts between the two grades, then it can be graded a 3rd time. So that's it on my part. Thank you for your time, your attention. I hope this addressed some of the worries or questions you guys had, and I'm ready to take any question.
So thank you very much, Jad, for such informative session. There are a couple of questions regarding, first thing first, for ethics, do we need to pay special attention at level 3 or in terms of preparation? Or, well, basically they're asking, will there be an essay question to be set on ethics?
Traditionally, the essay section of the level 3 exam was only MCQ. That was traditionally, that was, as far as I know, the case for all CFA exams. What I say is that if you don't want to provide, a rigid answer to this question, because obviously I can't know, the CFA Institute, it's their own exam, they own it, they can do whatever they want. What I can think of would be probably a question that would require you to use some knowledge that you have from ethics, but not in an MCQ format. Although I think it's rare. I never saw a case like that, but I could research further.
No worries. I never saw it as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so for second question, we have a candidate who's going to take the exam, his exam in 2023 August. He's asking, when shall he start his revision? Do you recommend?
Yeah. A good rule of thumb, of course, it depends on the background of every candidate. Candidates who have a very, very solid background and have passed levels 1 and 2, with very, very good grades, and more importantly, with a very deep understanding of the concepts, might, I'm saying, need a little bit less time. But a good rule of thumb is, if it's possible to start 6 months before the exam, I would definitely recommend that. You are all aware about the 300 hours and more rule. It's not a hard rule, but that's a survey that CFA Institute regularly conducts and shows that on average that's how much hours candidates commit. I would say give yourself more margin of error. So don't start in a way where you can only have 300, because if you have any unplanned event or anything that would distract you, you would fall short of your preparation. I would typically start 6 months before the exam if possible, and build a plan, follow that plan, make sure I have a first review, a second review, etc.
Thank you. Finally, it's basically general questions from the a poll that we did. Our candidates think that fixed income and derivatives are the most challenging topic as level 3. Well, do you have a quick tip or advice for our candidates on,
Sure.
on how to
Sure.
tackle them?
Yeah. Of course, there is a reason, right? A rational reason behind why those two topics are typically found to be the hardest. And the reason is because those are one of the most technical topics. Those are topics that have lots of formulas. And I took some time earlier. I looked at the absolute contribution. I was trying to show a bit where it comes from. And someone, of course, rightfully highlighted the fact that if we can go a bit faster, it's not really part of the tips. But honestly, I'm super convinced that it is part of the tips. Formulas in the fixed income section and concepts in the fixed income section are more difficult, because you have to deal with all the implications of duration, convexity, how to use those in practice. There are no shortcuts. You need to understand what you're doing. You need to understand hard rules, possibly see them demonstrated, because you will remember them for life. For example, if I have like just 30 seconds to add the last example, whenever you look at fixed income at immunization, all textbooks will make you memorize that you need to lower convexity. Why? My answer to the why is my direct answer to how to tackle those topics. You cannot become comfortable with the fixed income immunization topic if you don't know that you're minimizing the convexity of the portfolio for a reason. And that reason is to make the portfolio of coupon paying bonds look as much as possible like a zero coupon bond that doesn't exist. Because a zero coupon bond, among all bonds with the same duration, a zero coupon bond has the lowest convexity. So Eric, they need to know that. That's not wasting time, and that's not off topic. If you don't know that a zero coupon bond among all other bonds with the same duration has the lowest convexity, then you won't have a clue why CFA Institute is saying to immunize, lower the convexity. Now you know.
I
you want to mimic
agree on this subject, actually, because I remember that mock exam from 2018. I picked B, Because as I remembered, I always focus on the duration. I picked the 10 as my certain answer. But while I obviously I did it wrong and I go through the questions, and I recall that, oh, yes, the material did mention, well, you have to make sure the amount exceed your liability, or you have to try to match 10 as your duration, right? But they never mention which part is more important. So it brings two of the major points. Firstly, you have to do your mock exam, because if you never done it and go to the exam, you're completely crushed. Well, basically, we have a lot of August candidate here as well, who is going to have their result in 2 weeks time, right? Well, they attend along, or I encourage them to come tag along as well. Well, treat it as a put options. But the point being is, every level 3 candidates who attempt after they attempt the first mock exam, they're completely crushed, because they set off while doing their revision. They set off the objective of revising wrong. They thought it's a level 2 and level 1 and level 2 exam. They didn't go through every sentences thoroughly and deeply, and sometimes some of the key concepts just mentioned in a single sentence, but somehow you just simply miss that. So I completely agree with you. You really have to understand word by word of what's going on in the material. Otherwise, you get complete crush in mock exam. And honestly, I really hope you guys won't be having the same experience as I do. And that's why you have to leave 6 to 8 weeks to do a mock exam, because while we have just spent like 15 minutes just to cover all the details, all the tips, well, when it comes to real life, when you're doing your practice, well, it takes a lot of time. And really lock yourselves up during the final weeks, because, well, I've spent like 3 consecutive days just to understand the core option, the proof option, the value, the profit, all this. And I didn't memorize a single equation to the exam, because I understand every single bit of it. This is the mentality you should be when you enter the level 3 exam. So there's a advertisement question, basically. Well, are you going to teach all the courses provided by Wiley?
Yes, so far I'm doing that. So we're starting on November 12th, every Saturday, actually. So this would be my 3rd CFA Level 3 cycle with Wiley. Yes, I'm still doing that.
Yes, and well, back to Christie's the last question of the day. During my exam, I never write sentences more than three sentences long for 1 point. Remember, every point worth the same mark. There's no point like writing up stories, and never try to teach your marker what's the meaning of everything. There's a tendency of every candidate try to throw off every knowledge that they know about the topic, and they are trying to teach the marker instead of answering the question. This is a big no-no too, because it's waste time, and they won't mark it anyway. So thanks a lot. We had a great time having you here, and so truly appreciate your time and effort. And hopefully, we will meet each other in person very soon. And
I hope so.
Thank you all for joining the session. I hope you guys find it really rewarding, like I do. But last point, final advice: you have to start revising before understanding everything that we have just mentioned. The first criteria of taking an exam is you understand your material first. Put all these information back in your mind. Till October or January or December. But remember, these are the requirements. You are setting off to tackle these questions you know how tough the questions are today, for example. And while you're studying, you must focus and understand that what is required, but revise first. Put all these information behind you. Focus on your study. Try to understand the material. Okay? So, well, it's about time. Thank you for participating. And I wish you all good luck. Get that CFA charter. And I'll see you all in the reward ceremony. Thanks a lot for joining. Okay, thanks, Luke.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.